अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारणम्। Hare Krishna and welcome to today's episode of the Mahabharata. In the last episode, we have seen that very painful incident of the game of dice where Draupadi was attempted to be stripped naked by the Kauravas headed by Karna, Duryodhana, Dushasana and others. And although Dushasana tried his best to disrobe Draupadi, but then Draupadi surrendered herself completely to Lord Krishna, and Krishna in turn protected her modesty. And so Dushasana pulled and pulled at her sari with great anticipation, but that anticipation turned to amazement when he saw an endless supply of her sari cloth, and that amazement turned into frustration. That frustration became despair. Finally, he sat down fatigued, unable to disrobe Draupadi. Now, when the incidents had gone this far, Dhritarashtra had a change of heart. What did Dhritarashtra do? That is what we will be discussing today. Before we come to that, we need to understand a little bit about the whole egregious happenings in that game of dice. We all have understood how Yudhishthira was compelled to participate in the game of dice, not because he was inclined to it, but because it was the order of his superior, Dhritarashtra, whom he considered as good as his father. Now, although Yudhishthira knew that this was a trap laid out to hurt him and his brothers, Yudhishthira could not help it. He was looking towards Dhritarashtra's intervention to correct the injustice that was happening during the game of dice, but Dhritarashtra was silent all through. Now the question comes that when Draupadi was brought into that assembly and when her honor was being sullied by the Kauravas, why did Yudhishthira and the other Pandava brothers not act? Was it not their duty to protect the honor of their wife? Yes, it was their duty to the extent that their powers authorized them to protect her. We all have our limitations. Even though we may be wanting to protect our near and dear ones, there are some things which are beyond our power and we are unable to help them at times. This happens with all of us. Now, in the case of the Pandavas, although physically they might have been capable of protecting her, morally they were bound by the word they had given to the Kauravas that they were now their servants. And as servants, it was their duty to do the bidding of their masters. So, what use are such masters who do not protect the honor of their servants? So, does that not free the Pandavas from their binding to their words to the Kauravas, to Duryodhana? The fact is that the Pandavas, having lost all their kingdom, and having been stripped of their Kshatriya position, having become servants of Duryodhana, no more were they in a position to be able to provide protection to others. Protecting others, protecting the citizens is the duty of the Kshatriya. Kshattat trayate Kshatriyaha. A Kshatriya is a person who protects his citizens from any kind of danger. It is the Kshatriya king's responsibility to give protection to all his citizens. Now that the Pandavas were no longer kings, they were mere servants, they were mere ordinary citizens under the rule of Duryodhana. Now it was Duryodhana's duty as a king to protect the honor of the Pandavas, who are now also his citizens. Now if Duryodhana is not following his duty, if he is deviating, if he is flagrantly flouting the codes of Dharma, according to which he has to protect the honor of his citizens and prevent any danger to them, any harm to them, whether physically or economically or in terms of their honor. If Duryodhana, the king himself, is flouting these duties, then what can the citizen do? So the Pandavas, in fact, it was the duty of Duryodhana to protect Draupadi. He was not keeping up his duty. It was the duty of Dhritarashtra to ensure that there was no injustice to the Pandavas, and even he violated his duty. Now, because Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra and Karna and Dushasana, all these people, they flouted their dharma, their duty, does not mean that the Pandavas also should forget their duty. Actually, this was the biggest difference between Yudhishthira and the other Pandava brothers and Duryodhana. On the one hand, Duryodhana was ready to violate every rule of Dharma at the drop of a hat. Why? Because his whole consideration was, his whole focus was the end. What I will get, what I want to get, how do I satisfy my desire? The means did not matter to him. He was ready to achieve his desire by hook or by crook. It did not matter to him. It did not matter to him that he was violating the codes of Dharma. It did not matter to him that he was violating the rules of the Vedas. It did not matter to him that he was incurring grievous sin because of which he would have to suffer in the future. None of these things mattered to him. For him, all that mattered was, somehow I have to get Indraprastha in my hand. Somehow I have to insult the Pandavas. Somehow I have to insult Draupadi. This was his whole focus. Now, if you look at the Pandavas were reluctant to violate the codes of Dharma, the codes of virtuousness, even in the face of the greatest calamity. Even when Draupadi, their wife's honor, was put at stake, even there the Pandavas' consideration was, as per the codes of Dharma, what is our duty now? What are the steps that we can take? Or what are the things we should not be doing? So Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas' consideration, if we look at it from that perspective, the duty was resting with Duryodhana and with Dhritarashtra to protect Draupadi's honor, because she is also their citizen. They had been deprived of their authority to perform that function of protecting others the moment they were shown of their kingdom and they were converted into ordinary servants. We have examples of this in the Vedic history. Even though a person may be very well capable of defending himself, still in Vedic times the people would consider Is it my duty to defend myself, or is it somebody else's duty? When Vishwamitra Muni was performing tapasyas and yajnas in the forest, there was a demoness who was coming and creating trouble for him, not allowing him to carry out his spiritual duties. Vishwamitra Muni is such a powerful sage. Not only that, before Vishwamitra Muni became the sage, he had been a king, a very powerful, valiant king. So, it is not that he was unaware of the techniques of combat, how to fight with an asura, with a demoness. It was not unknown to him. Not only that, as a sage, he had powerful mantras by the dint of his austerities, with which he could have easily killed the demoness, but he did not do so. He considered, my duty as a sage, what is my duty? My duty is to engage in spiritual activities. Whose duty is it to ensure that my spiritual duties are carried on without any obstruction? It is the duty of the king. And therefore, Vishwamitra Muni went to Dasharatha Maharaj, who was ruling the kingdom at that time, and he informed him like this: there is this demoness who is creating trouble for me, so you have to please solve my problem. And Dasharatha Maharaj immediately said, yes, I am ready. I will come myself. You are such a great sage. It is a shame that if I am not able to protect you, I will come myself. And then Vishwamitra Muni said, no, you don't have to come. This is not such a big thing. Then Dasharatha Maharaj asked him, then whom should I send? Vishwamitra Muni said, send your two young sons, Sri Ramachandra and Lakshmana, with me, who were at that time just teenagers. Dasharatha Maharaj balked. He was daunted. My sons, they are so tender, they are just teenagers. They cannot fight with asuras. So, Vishwamitra Muni, please, you don't ask for them, I will come myself. Out of parental affection, Dasharatha Maharaj did not recognize the great valor and capability and strength, the unlimited strength of the Supreme Lord Ramachandra. For him, Ramachandra and Lakshmana were just his tender sons. So, out of parental affection, he was taken aback by Vishwamitra Muni's suggestion. But Vishwamitra Muni knows everything, and he is aware that this is also a leela of Lord Ramachandra, and so therefore he insisted and took Lord Ramachandra with him, and he taught Ramachandra all the art of warfare, and then Lord Ramachandra used that art in defeating that demoness. So you see how Vishwamitra Muni, although he knew the art of warfare, he did not engage in the war himself to quell the demons. He engaged the Kshatriyas, the king of that area, who was responsible, who was entrusted with that responsibility. This is because during those times, in the Vedic tradition and the Sanatana Dharma, the duties of different persons in the social functioning of the society was very well laid out. In today's world, unfortunately, that societal structure has completely collapsed of the Varnashrama Dharma. Now, we do not have an understanding of what is duty at all. We mistake our vritti, our occupation, to be dharma, to be karma, which is not correct. There is a big difference between vritti and dharma. There is a big difference between occupation for one's livelihood and one's duties towards all other rest of the society. We have duties towards our parents, we have duties towards our forefathers, we have duties towards the sages who have given us transcendental knowledge, we have duties towards the devatas who are supplying us all kinds of natural facilities such as sunlight and air and water, etc. for our livelihood. We have duties towards all other domestic, even to domestic animals like the cow and the dog, etc., which render us service. We have responsibilities, we have duties, we have obligations towards our other relatives. It may be my husband, it may be my wife, it may be my sister, my other relatives, my friends, whoever helps me in various activities. I have obligations towards all of them. There are duties prescribed in the Vedas for all this. So duty is completely different from occupation for one's livelihood. One may give up one occupation and take on another occupation, but one cannot give up one's duty. And as Lord Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, one must not give up one's duty, however imperfectly performed, to take up the duty of some other person, however perfectly they may be able to do it. This is against the laws of the scripture. I may be able to do my duty, say, with 50% efficiency, but I look at somebody else's assigned duty. I can do that much better, so let me do that. No. Even though you are assigned the duty, you are able to do imperfectly, it is better than doing some other person's duty which is not assigned to you very perfectly. This is the code of Dharma. And so, the Pandavas always, even in that calamitous situation, were considering what is virtuosity dictating to me. What should I do and what should I not do? Is this my duty to protect Draupadi or is it not? It is the duty of actually the emperor, the king. Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana were responsible for her protection. And if they are not performing their duty, does not mean that I should violate my duty, I should give up my duty. This is a very big difference between Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra and the Kauravas when compared with the Pandavas. Duryodhana never had such considerations. He never thought, what should I do and what should I not do? Is my activity according to Dharma or not? He was simply focused on the result. Somehow I have to get the result. The means don't matter, only the end matters. Whereas for the Pandavas, the end did not matter. No matter how they were insulted, whether they lost their kingdom, whether they lost the honor of their wife, whatever it was, they would not deviate from the means. The end was immaterial to them. Now the question comes, okay, Yudhishthira gave his word. Now what was the necessity for Bhima and Arjuna to follow Yudhishthira's this one? He has given his word. Why could not Bhima or Arjuna jump in and then protect Draupadi? Was following the instructions of their brother more important than protecting the honor of Draupadi? The fact is that Draupadi is also the wife of Yudhishthira. So there is the responsibility equal. Now as far as the Vedic culture was concerned, the eldest person had the responsibility of guiding the younger people on the path of Dharma. The younger people always looked up to the elder people for guidance. So everybody knew in that assembly that Yudhishthira Maharaj was Dharma Raja, he would never deviate from the path of Dharma. His brothers also knew that, and nobody knew the intricacies of Dharma better than Yudhishthira. And so therefore the younger brothers, Bhima, Arjuna and others, even though they could see such injustice being meted out in that assembly, they held on to their firm faith in their brother Yudhishthira Maharaj, that he knows the codes of Dharma very well and he will tell us what is the real dharmic duty that they had to perform at that point of time. So even Bhima and Arjuna were also very clear in their mind. We have to do what is our ordained duty. We cannot flout the requirements of our duty. We cannot violate the laws of Dharma. And so therefore the Pandavas are the most pious people. They are the most praiseworthy people. In fact, when the game of dice ended in this kind of fiasco, even though the Yudhishthira Maharaj lost in that game of dice, even though Draupadi was about to be disrobed, but Lord Krishna had to step in to save her, the fact is even Draupadi had no resentment in her heart towards Yudhishthira Maharaj. She had full confidence that whatever Yudhishthira Maharaj has done was within the codes of Dharma. She could clearly understand that even Bhima and Arjuna were bound by the ropes of Dharma, of virtuosity. And so therefore she had no resentment in her heart, because she was also equally disposed to follow the codes of Dharma rather than look at what was the result that had accrued out of that following of that Dharma. She had no resentment in her heart that, see, Yudhishthira Maharaj and Arjuna and Bhima, they followed the path of Dharma and they ditched me. There was no such resentment in Draupadi's heart. On the other hand, she was completely proud of her husbands that even in that position, they followed the path of Dharma. So finally, Dhritarashtra, when he saw that things had gone too far, maybe Dhritarashtra's whole thing was, as we have seen, his dual personality. He had love for the Pandavas, he had love for his younger brother, as well as he had too much love for Duryodhana and the throne. And that love for Duryodhana and the throne overwhelmed his love for the Pandavas. So maybe Dhritarashtra had no intention to insult the Pandavas like that. His intention would have been to just get the kingdom and be happy with that. Although actually even Indraprastha was not his. Hastinapura itself, the throne of Hastinapura which he and Duryodhana were occupying, that did not belong to them. That was actually, you can look at it, because of the magnanimity of the Pandavas, they were able to occupy that throne. Otherwise, the Pandavas were the rightful heirs to that throne, not Duryodhana, not Dhritarashtra. But look at the greed of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. When the Pandavas from scratch they built up their own kingdom, they wanted to go and occupy that. They were coveting that. So Dhritarashtra's eye was the opulence of Indraprastha. But even he had not expected that it would go to the extent of trying to disrobe Draupadi. That was too much. Dhritarashtra realized that. But by that time, before he could step in, already the act had happened. Everything was happening very swiftly. You see, now we are looking at that whole event in hindsight. But when they were in that whole assembly, when everything was going on, people sometimes have brain fades. You know, that's a common terminology we use nowadays. Sometimes some people, even though they have full understanding and the knowledge to be able to act properly in a situation, sometimes people, out of some brain fade at that point of time, they do something which is contrary to what should be done. That was similar thing could have happened with Dhritarashtra also, because of which he did not step in at the right time. But when it had gone to this extent, and when he saw Bhima taking vow after terrible vow, that shook Dhritarashtra out of his slumber, deep slumber that he was in, and he realized things had gone too far. And he understood that this was something which he had not bargained for. Whereas you see, in the case of Duryodhana, he coveted their kingdom also, and he also wanted to insult the Pandavas, and he wanted to satisfy his lusty desire towards Draupadi. So he got that opportunity and he tried to take full advantage of that. So Dhritarashtra knew about Duryodhana's love for the throne, but he did not know about his lusty desires towards Draupadi. If he had known earlier, probably he would have taken steps to prevent this. But anyway, things went out of hand and things had gone too far. Dhritarashtra woke up and then he immediately put a stop to everything. And what did Dhritarashtra do? He, in order to pacify the Pandavas, he returned everything that the Pandavas had lost. He returned the kingdom to Yudhishthira Maharaj. And then he begged them to forgive Duryodhana and others for whatever had happened, and he told them, let us forget and forgive. Although at the heart, Dhritarashtra also knew that this is not something which the Pandavas are going to forget, nor is Bhima going to forget his vow. This is going to create a big war in the future, and all my sons are going to be in great peril. Dhritarashtra knew this, but still he was trying to use conciliatory words to try to, as far as possible, to postpone the inevitable. That was Dhritarashtra's mood. And then Dhritarashtra, publicly in front of everyone, he announced that Yudhishthira, he actually he commended the Pandavas, he commended Yudhishthira Maharaj for standing by virtuosity, by standing by Dharma, even in such great distress. And trying to, and he used many conciliatory words and tried to console Draupadi also. And then finally he dissolved the assembly and asked everyone to go back to their respective places. So the Pandavas, accompanied by Draupadi, with a very heavy heart, they took their belongings and mounted on their chariots and started back to Indraprastha, their minds completely disturbed and their hearts heavy with the insult that they had faced, with the dishonor that they had faced. However, we have to understand that when a person gets insulted on account of some mistake he has done, it is a cause for great shame. But the Pandavas underwent such great dishonor, not for any fault of theirs. So there was no shame on their part. The shame entirely rested on Duryodhana, Karna, Dushasana and all these, Dhritarashtra and all these people. So now when the assembly was dissolved, everybody left to their respective residences and slowly the hall petered out and it became empty. The Pandavas left for Indraprastha. Bhishma went back to his quarters, Vidura went back to his palace, Dhritarashtra went back to his room, and the entire hall, all the people who had assembled, slowly they all left the assembly hall. Gradually the assembly hall became empty, except for a few people. Who were these people and what were they waiting in that hall for? Join us in our next episode to know about this. Thank you for joining us today. Hare Krishna. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.